I get to talk about the Lord. Second, I get to talk about family. And then sometimes I get to talk about politics. Today, I have a special guest with you. I have Laughlin.
Laughlin.
Laughlin. And so, Dr. Hodge is really working on her pronunciation of names. He did an amazing thing. He created the Readable Bible. And so, one thing, through the years, if you studied any church history, translations of the Bible, for us, started with Martin Luther and the Reformation. But Mr. Laughlin, you did something really interesting, not just actually incredible. You created a Bible or a translation of the Bible. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did?
We made the Bible what I'd call normal. The scripture throughout the ages has always been available to believers and to unbelievers in the normal form that people wrote in those days. And that form has changed throughout the ages. But we stopped changing formats in the mid 1800s when the Cambridge Paragraph Bible came out, the first paragraphed Bible. Since then, we've developed some 20 different formats we use to present data or information to people, but the Bible never adapted to those forms. The earliest manuscripts had no spaces between words. They had no uppercase letters, no lowercase letters. There were no punctuation of any kind. And as these things were developed to make it easier to read, Bibles adopted those forms. But we have not used genealogical tables. We have not used specification documents. We have not used law book forms or any of those in our modern Bibles. So the Lord spoke to me 14 years ago and asked me to put the Bible in modern formats. So in the Readable Bible, it looks like the Bible would look if Moses and Joshua and Paul were sitting at a computer when God spoke to them. When God said to Moses, put Jacob's genealogy here, or he said, here's Jacob's genealogy, Jacob would put a genealogical table down there today. There's no way that he would put sentences saying who was born to who. So I've just done that with all the formats. In the 10 Commandments, in any Bible, it's just a page of paragraphs. Today, we would number them. When you turn the page, you'd see 10 numbers. You'd realize, oh, there's a list of 10 important things here. So before you start reading the text, your eye and your mind understands what you're about to read. The whole book of Leviticus is formatted like a modern law book with Roman numeral 1, 2, and 3. It has its own table of contents. One reviewer just said that I've made the book of Leviticus fun to read. I think that may be an exaggeration. The tabernacle specifications, each page is a specification document. The letters that go back and forth in Ezra and Nehemiah, each letter appears on a piece of parchment like a letter. So when you turn the page, you see, oh, I'm about to read a letter, and oh, look, there in the next page is a response. It makes it so much easier to understand the Bible to use modern formats.
What led you to do this?
Well, I think God did. I was in an airport coming back from doing humanitarian work in Afghanistan, and I was just bored. Was in a bookstore looking for a book to read, and I really think God spoke to me and asked me, "Why are you looking for a book to read? You have a Bible in your briefcase." That was embarrassing. What can I say? So I walked over, actually what I said to the Lord was, well, the Bible's hard to read. And I hear this question, why is it hard to read? Saying my book's hard to read. And I just was frustrated and embarrassed. So I walked over to the nonfiction books section of the bookstore and I started flipping through books. And I discovered that they all had different formats for different kinds of information. And so that's how the Lord put the idea in my mind to do a Bible in modern formats.
Okay, fair enough. So my question would be, there's many different translations.
Right.
and some people still think that King James is the original the original Bible. And
Right.
so what okay, so I know you were explaining about how it was kind of set up a little bit,
Mhm.
but how do you what makes yours different? Because we have the NIV, which is
Right.
supposed to be nearly inspired version of the Bible. What makes yours inspired?
Okay, I'm going to back off the word inspired. No Bible translator would say his Bible's inspired. God stopped inspiring people to write script. It's not inspired by God, and no translation is inspired by God. But it's all translators do their best to express the Hebrew or Aramaic or Greek text in the language they're speaking as best they can. But there are many ways to do this. All translations were literal up until the 1950s. That is, the translators looked at the Hebrew word or the Greek word. And they said, what's the English word that best represents this today, the way we use language? In the 1950s, a man named Eugene Nida came up with, for Bibles anyhow, the idea of thought for thought translation. Instead of the literal text, expressing it in the words we would use today, and it might be 4 or 5 words instead of 2 words. However that would be. Actually, before that, the Good News translation used that technique, but it had a 4th grade vocabulary. The NIV used that technique with a full vocabulary, and it's great to read, and that's why it's the #1 Bible today, other than King James, which has so much history in it. Then Kenneth Taylor paraphrased the Bible. The people that did the ESV said, we want to go back to a more literal text, and they took a more literal text. Literal's hard to read. Thought for thought is easier to read, but it's not. Sometimes people will disagree with how the translators of the thought for thought Bibles interpreted the literal text. So I decided I wanted a text where it's as easy to read as the Living Bible, which is a paraphrase, but it's as accurate as the New American Standard, which is generally considered the standard for literal translation. So in the Readable Bible, you always have on the page in front of you the literal text. But if the literal text is awkward English expression, we use a thought for thought expression and we footnote the literal text. So one thing that you can, and we have compared that text to all modern translations to make sure we have a good translation. The second thing we have done is we have always used the format that would be used today for that kind of material. So Psalms is poetry. When we write poetry today, we do a lot of indentation. We use cascading text, and throughout Psalms, the Readable Bible uses cascading text, and that makes it much easier to follow the thought. The same thing in Romans and theology, which is complicated. Paul has very long sentences. You can look at a page and you'll see there's 3 main thoughts because there's just 3 lines on the left edge. And then under the first one, there'd be maybe 2 thoughts cascaded, indented a half an inch, and a sub thought under one of those, or 2 or 3 sub thoughts. So this makes it easier and to read, but the text itself is a very literal text. And we can put it up against any. I encourage you to put the Bible you're reading next to the Readable Bible. As a matter of fact, many people use it somewhat as a study Bible. They use their standard Bible they're reading, and they put a Readable Bible next to it. Another advantage is that we have to put a map everywhere there's movement. Throughout the book of Joshua, for instance, you have battle after battle, town after town that you've never heard of. In the Readable Bible, right there on the same page or the next page, there's a map showing where the towns are, which army went where, and where the battles were. So you always know what you're reading about.
Oh, that seems fun. So who helped you this? I mean, because this sounds like a project, not that just one person can do. Who helped you with
And
this?
no way. I took a year after the Lord spoke to me. I took a year and I just studied nonfiction books and the Bible. And I determined that there were 23 different kinds of information in the Bible that normally would be presented in 17 formats. And then I translated the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, because in those you have all those formats, almost all those formats. Then I did Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, then I did Psalms, and then the New Testament. Then a man named Dr. Brendan Kennedy heard what I was doing, and he got in contact with me through a mutual friend, and he said he would like to join the project. So he came on board. He's an Old Testament scholar and a Greek scholar, and he reviewed all the work I had done, and then he did the first cut and everything else, and I reviewed that. And then a man named Dr. Colby Kinzer heard about it, and he came on board. By the grace of God, Bot Radio Network made public service announcements about what we were doing and invited people in their audience to participate. And we got 450 volunteers who volunteered to read what we're doing each book as we finished a book at a time. So like when we finished Ezra, we sent Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. We have, see if this shows up. We have 27 books like this: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth is a book, First and Samuel. So when we would finish a file, we would send it out to the development. We called them our development team. We would ask them who would like to read through Exodus, critique it, maybe come up with some other ideas on how to format something better. And typically 50 people would respond to that, and we would send it out to them, and 25 or 30 would actually read through it, critique it, and give us a file back. So we had a big development team, we call it, to review stuff. And then there was a woman who was really the go-to #1 proofreader for many years for Bibles at Zondervan. She came on board and reviewed everything. And we just had oodles of people coming on all the time. Sometimes we had 20 or 30 people working at a time.
So how long did this project take?
In 2008, after I had a feeling for how I would do this and what I thought I'd do, I went to my wife and I said, sweetheart, we'd had a bunch of business reverses. We were 65 years old at that time. I said, sweetheart, we're down to very little money. I ought to get a job, but God has laid this idea for a Bible in my heart, and you won't believe this. I said to her, it'll take me 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, we won't have any money left. We'll have used our retirement savings, but God will take care of us like he did when we started a church in Rhode Island in our 20s. And I said, what would you like me to do? And she said to me, if you can do this, and it's never seen and never published, but you have a better walk with the Lord when it's done, and you know the scripture better, let's do it. And so we started out that way in 2008, and I had told her it would take 5 years. It took 14 years. It was just published the 1st of November. And God has enabled us to pay every bill.
You know, and I appreciate that, because if you would have said that it would have taken a year, because I really didn't know what you were going to say. And so if this project would have just taken a year, or, you know, I probably would have questioned the validity of, you know, with my dissertation, I couldn't get it done in a year. And most people do. I did fall in love during that time and get married right on Harley and everything. So, I mean, I did get distracted. But when you're talking about translating how many thousands of years of history, you know, that's a lot of history that you were translating and trying to put in. So personally, when you invest in a project and you saying 14 years, you know, people change sometimes every 7 years. How did this project affect you personally?
My wife is amazed because I'm a very creative individual. My wife looks at something and she appreciates it for what it is. I look at something and I wonder, how could it be better? I wonder, how is it made? How might it be made different? How long will it last? What could be done that it might last longer? That's just the way my mind works. So I have changed what I do almost every 3 years for the 56 years we've been married, 58 years we've been married. And the Lord laid this in my heart, and I set up a basement in my office with whiteboard all around it to write on, to throw ideas on as I was putting this together. And my wife just can't believe I spent 14 years at the same project. Every time an idea would come into my mind for something else that I would like to do, I had to say, no, Rod, this is what God has asked you to do. And I spent 14 years in my basement doing this, in response to that. Now, when it was published, I put a copy on my bed. I got down on my knees. I grew up as a little boy, always praying on my knees. I didn't get saved till I was 28, but I still pray on my knees, although I like to stand and raise my arms to God too in praise. But I put it on the bed. I said, Lord, this is your book. I've spent 14 years in the basement doing this. I'm an extrovert, and I asked him to give me 10 more years of life and 10 men so I could do evangelism and discipleship the next 10 years. And when I go home to be with the Lord, I'm asking the Lord to give me 10 men that'll continue the work that I do. 14 years in my basement. My wife couldn't believe that I could do that, and I wouldn't have believed it, but I'm a totally changed person in terms of concentration, in terms of, and actually love of the scripture. That's an amazing thing. But now this is embarrassing. Would you believe that I never liked Psalms?
Um, well, Leviticus is probably one of my least.
Oh, okay.
When
Well, I
I
will
was
say,
there was a time a few years ago, and there was a series of about 3 years. I was going through the Bible about 3 times a year, and for some reason, I would just like want to skip through Leviticus, and I did, and I would skip through Leviticus. So no, so no, I actually believe that.
so when I did the Readable Bible Psalms, I fell in love with Psalms. And I can't wait till you read the Readable Bible Psalms and see how they speak to you. The reason Leviticus is such a frustrating book for people is that they have no idea what they're reading and what they're about to read. So in the Readable Bible, one of the beautiful things we do in the 27 book set, we didn't do this in the one single volume Bible because it'd take too many pages. It's 2,200 pages because of all the formats. But in the individual books, each book has a table of contents. And in the book of Leviticus, you look at the contents and you see the structure of the book. Then before you're reading the text, you have these headings and you can see what you're about to read. That makes it much easier to read. So
Do you
people
buy
enjoy
it
the
one book at
Bible
a
more.
time, or do you have to buy it as a set?
You can buy, I can't believe I don't have one here in front of me. I've got to grab this. Hang on 10 seconds.
No problem, no problem. Y'all, thank you for hanging in there with us. This is a really good show. And when this goes, make sure you drop some comments in the chat. Ask your questions or Mr. Laughlin. That way he can possibly, he'll have a link to this as well for his social media when this comes out. This is coming out, it should be March. And so drop your questions in the chat. He'll see it. Okay, he's showing us with the Readable Bible.
Bible. It's a single volume, 2,200 pages, published by Iron Stream Media. And it's available at christianbook.com. They sell it at a 26% discount for $27.99. And you can buy, as I say, a 27 book set that has 27 individual books like this. This is available at got to get it up here, christianbook.com, Amazon, any local Christian bookstore, or Barnes & Noble has it. Not on the shelf necessarily, but they can order it.
So is that the complete?
Yes. Yeah, this is a complete Bible.
Okay, so it's bigger than your normal average Bible,
Well, it
which
is.
is good with all the information in there. You were talking about some of the resources that was in it. I did get a chance to look at some of the maps and everything. I was like, oh, this is really neat.
Yeah, there's
Um,
130 maps in it that normally you'd have to have a Bible atlas. And here, for instance, in Exodus chapter 20, 25, the Ark of the Covenant specifications, it's set up as a specification document. See, here's a picture of it. And then the text reads, make an Ark of the Covenant and material, acacia wood, length, width, height, all in feet instead of cubits. Well, that takes a lot more space than just a paragraph. So that's why it's 2,200 pages.
so okay, so I saw you have like the Exodus resource
Book.
versus the big book. What are those one and the same, or
The
is that
text is identical. The individual books, and we also have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Galatians through Philemon is a volume, Isaiah is a volume, Psalms is a volume. Each one has a table of contents. It has in the back, it has extra resources. It has a list of every person in the book, who they are, what they did, and what chapter that's in.
wow,
In the back
wow.
of each book, there's a subject index just for that book. So there's a lot of aids in the individual books in the 27 book set that are not in the whole Bible. The other thing is you can buy, if you're in a Bible study that's studying Jeremiah, you can just buy the individual book of Jeremiah. So it's
Okay.
wonderful that all those individual books are for sale at christianbook.com, and they
And
can
so
be purchased through your local bookstore.
I think that's how I'm gonna start. And one of my favorite book is Genesis, the
Mhm.
beginning of all things. And so
Right, right.
um so I think I'm gonna do that. And then I've been really studying the Gospels, and so I think that'll be a fun place for me to start.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, and so if you're interested in maybe studying with me on the radio in the Readable Bible, just go ahead and drop that in the chat and I'll get with you, and maybe we'll go to Facebook Bible College and study together. And so I'm so excited. And so you talked about all the people that so if I want to, so how do I, so you said the different avenues where we can find the Bible.
mhm.
Who helped you publish it?
It's published by a Christian publishing company, Iron Stream Media. And I met them at the Christian Products Expo in 2019, and the owner, John Herring, was standing there. And I was leaving at 5 o'clock. The meeting was over. The convention floor was closing, and I was going to dinner with my grandson. And I got out in the lobby, and the Lord said, go back and talk to that tall man back there who was standing under the Baker and Taylor sign. Baker and Taylor is a Christian book distributor. So I said, Lord, I got a dinner meeting with Holt, and just felt the Lord saying, go back and meet that man. So I went back, and I had in my hands samples of what I was doing in the Readable Bible. Went back and I introduced myself. I said, I'm Rod Laughlin. And he says, my name is John Herring. And I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't really quite know why I was meeting him. So above his head, it said, New Hope Publishers. I said, do you relate to New Hope Publishers? And he said, I own the company. That's part of Iron Stream Media. So I said, oh, I'm doing this new Bible. Would you like to see what I'm doing? And he said, sure. So I showed him, and he said to me, I would be honored to publish that, but I don't have the resources to publish a whole new Bible. So I said, well, I'm not somebody that any publisher would choose to put together a new Bible. I think we would like a publisher who who really believed in what we were doing and would publish it by faith, not because they're full of resources and all kinds of contacts. So my wife and I and the whole team, we have felt from the beginning that if the Readable Bible is going to get in front of Christians around the world, it will be by acts of God, not by monetary power.
Right.
So to have a publisher who needed God to step in to make it happen was exactly what we wanted.
And one thing I've learned about publishing, I own a small publishing house, and the advertisement alone is insane.
It is difficult.
And so if you're going to do a piece of work, you really need to believe in it. And people put their hearts and souls into projects,
Mhm.
and and hope for the best. And a lot of stuff doesn't go anywhere, but I really believe that the project that you did is going to be blessed. Mr. Rod,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for joining me today on the show. People, y'all check out the different avenues to find this book, to find this resource, the Bible that he spent 14 years investing his life into getting. I believe it's going to be a blessing to me. I believe it's going to be a blessing to you. And thank you so much. Is there any last words that you have for us, Mr. Laughlin?
Yes, I'd like to encourage all your audience, if there's a Christian bookstore in their town, go to the Christian bookstore and order the Readable Bible through them so that they can make a few dollars. They're dedicated people. They need our business.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
If not,
And
go to Christian Book.
yes,
Support them.
yes, support your Christian bookstores.
Yes.
So I'll see you next week on God Family Politics. Thank you for being with me. I'm Dr. Tyra Hodge signing out.